Good morning, everyone. My name is Raffael Fasel. I am the Executive Director of the Cambridge Centre for Animal Rights Law, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all in person here to our European Animal Rights Law Conference 2021 in Cambridge. In person. Yay. We made it. Who would have thought that's something that we would take a few moments to savor at some point, right? When Sean, the centre's director, and I, Sean, where are you? Right there in the back. When we launched our centre in spring 2019, one of the first things that we wanted to do was to create an annual European Animal Rights Law Conference. And our aim was to bring together really the leading scholars in animal rights law, have them talk to each other, and promote this exciting new area of law. Now, little did we know that our first annual conference that we organized in September 2019 would have to wait for 2 years to be succeeded by the second annual conference. Now, of course, we're only all too familiar with the circumstances that have led to the postponing of the 2020 conference and, sadly, to the frustration of so many other things in our lives. Like many others, our centre has tried to make a virtue of necessity, and we've moved our events and activities mostly online during the pandemic. The move to Zoom in particular has allowed us to replace the 2020 conference with 2 virtual workshops that has explored the relationship with or between animal rights and some cognate topics. The first such workshop took place in September 2020 and was entitled Ravens and Rivers, Debating the Rights of Animals and Nature. This workshop explored and leveraged synergies that exist between animal rights and rights of nature. The second workshop on Rabbits and Robots, Debating the Rights of Animals and Artificial Intelligences, which we organized in June this year, discussed similarities between AI and animal rights, as well as some of the differences that exist. The Animal Rights Law course that we teach at Cambridge, as well as the Talking Animals Law and Philosophy series, were also moved online. Perhaps the greatest benefit of all of this has been that it has allowed us to reach a global audience. We've also recorded our course and most events and have made them accessible for free on our website so that everyone can watch them at home at any time. The increased turnout and convenience of these virtual events and the travel emissions that they helped save have inspired us to continue organizing at least some of our events online and to make everything available online, including this conference here, which we are recording, as I mentioned before, and it's going to be made available on our website maybe in a week or 2 or so. The pandemic has, however, also brought home exactly how valuable this interpersonal exchange in real life can be, even if we need a lot of hand sanitizer. Now, whether it's the ability to see an audience's reaction, like this, the opportunity to have an informal discussion after a talk, or to socialize over dinner, as we did yesterday evening, there are certain things that virtual meetings simply cannot replace. Our aim as a centre is to continue organizing in-person events where the benefits of meeting excellent speakers, of connecting with like-minded thinkers, and learning more about animal rights in general outweigh opposing considerations. In the case of this year's conference, we believe this to be the case. But the pandemic has also taught us a much more significant lesson than simply how to organize events online. One of its most important legacies will be the awareness that it has raised of the catastrophic impact that human activities have on the planet. One of the negative consequences of the climate crisis is on the many animal species who are finding it very difficult to adapt to deteriorating environments. While this has been on people's radars for some time, I believe, what was new is the fact that human encroachment on nature and disrespect for animals' interests can also have direct consequences for people as well, including those in the privileged West. In fact, there is hardly anyone in the world today who has not experienced firsthand the dangers of zoonotic diseases. We've all come rather too close to experiencing what it is like to be a bat. Nagel was ahead of his time, it seems. Now, a host of scientific studies have shown that deforestation, urbanization, intensified agriculture, have created a vicious cycle that is spiraling out of control. Such activities have a negative impact on animals' natural habitats, and they lead to a loss in biodiversity. This then brings wild animals closer to farmed animals, which in turn increases the risk of cross-species transmission of diseases. The result is a toxic cocktail of viral mutations and zoonotic spillover that harms both humans and animals. The need for a One Health approach that takes seriously the overlaps between human, animal, environmental health has perhaps never been as urgent as today. Thankfully, there have been numerous great initiatives to raise our understanding of the interconnectedness of these issues. I'm just going to give one example. Eva Meyer, who's here, has, together with Charlotte Blattner and Catherine Herman, organized a wonderful series of webinars called Animals, Climate Change and Global Health, which discuss this topic, and you can watch the webinars online at animalsclimatehealth.com, and I'd encourage you to go and watch them. They're really great. Now, it's obvious that the pandemic could not have developed the way it has, we believe, if our relationship toward animals in the wild, on the farm, or elsewhere was characterized by respect for these animals' intrinsic interests in life, integrity, and a healthy environment. Perhaps the COVID pandemic has made plain the need to take animals' interests and their rights seriously, not as a silver bullet, but as a necessary piece in a puzzle that includes other pieces such as protecting the environment, protecting rights of vulnerable human beings. Now that we are still a far way off from realizing these goals has become clear to me recently as I was reading a piece in The Economist. The article addressed the African swine fever that is currently wreaking havoc on Chinese pig farms, although only among the pigs because it's not contagious for humans. In 2019 alone, this African swine fever has led to the death of somewhere between 60 and 120 million pigs in China, where industrial animal production is on the rise. Now, I would personally have expected the author to discuss the disease's origins, perhaps, in the introduction of pigs to wild animal habitats by European farmers. Or the author could have discussed the problem of factory farming, which of course intensifies the risk and the consequences of disease. And not to mention the systematic violation of the pig's rights. But it did none of that. Instead, the only lesson the piece seemed to draw from the pandemic was that Chinese officials should not try to cover up the disease. Now, as if this was the only problem with this. Now, maybe the lesson from this should be that I should cancel my subscription to The Economist. But really what I think I want to say here is that while the pandemic has brought some enlightenment, I think, unless human interests are at stake, I think we're still far from paying attention, or sufficient attention at least, to animals' interests. Now, one of the missions of the Centre is to help remedy exactly that situation. We want to achieve this by exploring in depth what it would mean to take animals' interests seriously by granting them certain rights. The annual European Animal Rights Law Conference is an important piece in that sort of puzzle, and it is in this spirit that we have selected the speakers of this year's conference. Today and tomorrow, some of Europe's, if not the world's, leading experts in animal rights law and cognate disciplines will be presenting their latest research on some of the key questions in the field. One of these questions is whether and to what extent non-human animals are agents rather than mere patients, and how their potential agency could shape the law. This question will be addressed in our first panel. This panel will then be followed by a presentation by our keynote speaker, Alistair Cochrane. In his address, Alistair will consider how the concept of interspecies solidarity can bridge the gap between the positive moral sentiments that many of us have toward animals and legal and political change. The second panel, then, will be dedicated to the emerging subfield of animal rights constitutionalism. Here, one of the central questions that we'll discuss is how constitutional systems can and should institutionalize rights for all sentient beings. Tomorrow, a large panel will start tackling the ever-relevant debate of whether animals would have to overcome essentially their property status in order to possess fundamental rights and some related questions. The conference will conclude tomorrow afternoon with a panel exploring the parallels between animal exploitation and warfare, and we'll discuss how we can even begin to understand some of the unique atrocities that are committed toward animals. Now, before we kick off the presentations, I want to say a few more mundane things about housekeeping. We are still in a pandemic, as you've probably noticed. So we have a few safety measures in place. The chairs have been set up in a socially distanced way, so if you could keep them that way, that'd be great. We've also placed a number of hand sanitizers throughout the room. Feel free to use those. The French doors will be open to ensure good air circulation. Now, face masks are no longer legally required in the UK, but we encourage the use of those masks, especially as you walk around indoors. Helen, who's kindly helping us today and tomorrow, she's got some free face masks for you if you haven't grabbed one yet. Tea and coffee will be served on the tables right behind you there. Please feel free to also just go outside if you prefer with your cups and snacks. Small reminder also that the tea and coffee are free for everyone, whereas the lunches and the formal dinner tonight, you would have to have booked a relevant sort of ticket for those, or be a speaker or a speaker's guest. Lunch and dinner will be served in Westminster College Hall, which is basically just in the building over there. It's like a 15 meters walk or so, and we can sort of take you there. Again, during lunch, you'll be able to bring your trays outside if you prefer. All food and drinks are plant-based. Also, another thing I want to mention, as you see in our program, the speakers' presentations will not be followed by individual Q&As. Rather, we'll have a sort of panel for each of the sessions toward the end of each panel, where you can all ask your questions or make your comments. You're warmly invited to participate. Now, finally, I'd like to thank our donors, the Woolf Institute for Animal Rights Law and Policy and the Jeremy Collar Foundation, without whose generous support this whole event would not have been possible. So thank you very much.